Welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. Our mission is to help you be better prepared for your business acquisition or sale. Being prepared will ensure you maximize returns and minimize risks. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Dominic Rinaldi.
Hey, M&A Unplugged community. This is your host, Dominic Rinaldi. Market data shows that capturing the anticipated value from a merger is difficult and rare. It is estimated that only 50% of all mergers create positive returns. How do you stack the deck in your odds so that you can achieve your value metrics? My guest today, Jim Jeffries, is an expert in this area. He even co-founded the M&A Leadership Council along with Jack Prouty. The M&A Leadership Council is an educational platform for M&A professionals and corporate executives so that they have access to the necessary knowledge to ensure M&A integration success. Jim spent 25 years leading national and international consulting companies, private equity, and M&A. Integration is such an important component of M&A, and I'm so pleased to have an expert like Jim on the show to help you be better prepared for an acquisition or merger. Before we get into the interview, please head over to K2 Advisor and take our free seller or buyer assessment. These assessments will help you understand how ready you really are for an acquisition or sale. And being prepared is critical to ensuring that you maximize returns and minimize risks. Thank you for being here. Jim, welcome to M&A Unplugged. So happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm delighted with the things you're doing for the M&A community. It's become very popular, and I feel honored to be on your program.
Thank you so much. Jim, if you wouldn't mind, can you take a few minutes, just give people a quick backgrounder on yourself? And you've done so much. We could probably make that the whole show. But if you could give everybody the highlight of your career and stuff you've done, I would appreciate that.
I'll be happy to do that, Dominic. The background for me is basically an entrepreneur, an idea guy. I've had several companies I've divested, most successfully, one unsuccessfully. So part of that is obviously the learning. But it was back 20 some years ago that I was heading a consulting firm. It had roughly 200 consultants, and we elected to get in partnership with a large PE firm. And it was an interesting concept to be able to provide the consultants shared equity and upside with the PE group. And our role was to improve the operations of the businesses that were acquired. We began doing roll-ups, and that became a whole new experience. I mean, when you start rolling other interests and managing the portfolio and that kind of thing, then we learned very quickly that integration is complex and difficult. And we were doing integration by the seat of our pants and doing it intuitively. What does it take, to competitors? How hard can that be? Mm-hmm. So once I retired from that business, I got very interested in the idea of merging entities and generating value from doing that. So I founded a company that was in the merger integration business, and we went to market, and we became very successful in the first couple of deals we did because we did them on a counterintuitive basis. Successfully, some not so much, but obviously there was a tremendous amount of things to learn. And so the difficulty in learning the practices that were necessary to build value were not apparent to me out there in the M&A community. There was a lot of training around how you do the deal, maybe strategy a bit, targeting a bit, diligence a lot with the accounting firms and others. Mm-hmm. How to do the deal wasn't as difficult to learn about and be successful at as how to complete the deal. I mean, that was my thing that I that resonates with a lot of people is doing the deal versus completing the deal. And that's when you get all tied up in this integration and those kinds of things. And so my belief is that integration and completing the deal starts at strategy. And too many people want to segment all of these things and not intersect all of these things and have them work together. So that was the start of the idea of offering the M&A community training around, particularly the buy side, training around M&A best practices for everything, let's say from diligence through integration and maybe optimization beyond that. And it's a rail that you have to go on, and everything intersects, you know, in that environment. And so founded the M&A Leadership Council, which people can go to and look at macouncil.org and see what that's all about. And the Leadership Council has since 2010 been rather successful. I think it's fairly well known in the M&A community.
Yeah, and did I read correctly that you've now educated over 4,500 M&A professionals around these concepts?
That's right.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
We've been very blessed since Jack Prouty and I started this business, and we started opening with a training program that might have, you know, 10, 12, 15 people attend, to where now, you know, our on-site programs, which we're rather well known for because we do them in very nice resort communities and areas. But that's changed a lot since March.
Yeah, without a doubt. And am I correct in saying, Jim, that you're training both M&A professionals, but also in-house M&A groups, corporate development groups,
Yes.
and senior leadership inside of companies?
Yes, the need is apparent all the way up to the CEO.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are counterintuitive, countercultural that have to be done in, say, integration. Decision-making is a challenge, and most companies do it all wrong. So absolutely.
Yeah.
So the training that we've been doing started out as integration specialty, but we've broadened that out to where, you know, it goes all the way from strategy through the corp development roles to the diligence and integration.
Well, Jim, I congratulations. I know you've built a tremendous business there, and you've helped a lot of people. And I'm so excited to talk to you today about this concept of completing the transaction. I've been on this bandwagon for a long time. In fact, you know, we're now starting to educate and consult with buyers and sellers well in advance of their transactions. And one of the things that I ask buyers in the first meeting is, do you know how you would integrate a business? Is that part of your strategic plan? And invariably, the answer that comes back is no. And I agree with you. I think it's such an important piece, because if not, as you stated earlier, I mean, you really could be impacting the value of that acquisition tremendously.
Well, you absolutely could be, Dominic. The typical, maybe I can't say the typical CEO, but I think the typical management team today thinks, as they have in the past for decades, thinks that, you know, how difficult can it be to bring this company that we know so much about, that we've investigated, and so forth, how difficult can it be to onboard those assets? And I think it's the big challenge. I mean, I think that many people would state that, you know, half the deals don't deliver the value that you promised the investment community. But integration is difficult, and I think most of the C-level just doesn't want to mess with it after close.
Wow.
And the other challenge that's out there that maybe is certainly bigger is that most integration activities are done by people who haven't done them in the past, or they've done them, but we don't know that they've been successful at it. So what kind of playbooks, what kind of tools and templates and just just the headset for integration do they bring to the party.
Yeah. Did I
So
hear you correct, Jim? Did you say that it's likely 50% of acquisitions don't hit their ROI targets because they didn't have an integration plan?
at least that many, I
At
think,
least that
Dominique.
many.
Yeah, I
Wow.
think you're saying ROI. I think there's a lot of different metrics that,
Mhm.
and you also have to know how long are you going to give it to perform, and
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But I would voice it this way: most M&A deals don't deliver the value that was promised.
Mm. Got it.
Okay, that's a pretty easy statement to make.
Okay. Okay. So why don't we start with, this is such a meaty topic, but let's start with when you first sit down with somebody and you talk about integration and how important it is to have it in your upfront plans. How do you describe integration? What goes into it, and how do you approach that topic with senior executives?
Well, integration, in my mind, and integration that is trained by the M&A Leadership Council, the very strong belief is, and the proven concept is, that integration starts with strategy. And I think by making a statement like that, I think you're telling them that it's more important than almost anything else. So if you don't have a strategy behind what you're going to, your appetite and what you're going to go after, you don't have a strategy behind how you're going to make that happen, and what the resources are going to be, and what the outcomes are going to be, and then how you're going to generate those outcomes that you want, then you're not prepared, in my mind,
Yeah.
to make an acquisition. One other thing that I would say that's important today, that is fairly nuanced, is that many of the companies who are making a lot of deals today are managing their businesses like a portfolio. And I think your meetings with CEOs and the management team, et cetera, you're going to find so many today that maybe that's a new concept to them. But I think that value is really created by having the talent to make acquisitions and also make divestments effectively. And some of the strategies are to make acquisitions so that they're not so tightly integrated that you're able to divest of them more easily. Meeting with CEOs, the thing that they're most interested in and they get their arms around, which I've been teaching for a long time, still taught at the council since I retired, and that is that the S3 model, I used to call it: speed, synergies, and stability. S3, speed, synergies, and stability. And all of those play an important role in integration. Since Jack Welch first announced the idea that speed was the most important thing in integration, you got to get it over with. You got to tear the Band-Aid off quickly. That'll reduce the long-term pain, etc. Speed is very important. So I think we lose a lot of that. We certainly lose a lot of that in decision making and some of the protocols we have in terms of building our teams, etc. We elongate the process, hoping not to break glass, but broken glass is fine. You just got to get it over with. So you got speed, you got synergies. You have to understand how to capture synergies, and not necessarily realize, but capture. Do the things to capture synergies: revenue, cost. I even think performance is a synergy, when you're acquiring a company. And the last, and I would say the most important thing, is stability. How are we going to stabilize this union after we've made the acquisition on every area, in every, part of the businesses as we do that? So stability is very, very important as well. So S3 is important. So I would go into meeting with CEOs. I think that was your question.
Yeah.
C-level, and I would just be preaching S3
Yeah. Yeah.
more than anything, and
Yeah.
saying, tell me how you're going to do that.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen throughout my career in M&A is that even when people do think about integration early on, they underestimate the amount of time and the resources that it's going to take to actually pull off integration. And one of my examples is, they just expect that their current head of HR is going to be able to take on the additional task of, taking over the other HR group, with no thought to, well, that HR person probably has a full-time job. So are you going to peel some things off of their plate so they can take time out to do the integration? Are you going to give them an additional resource? Do you find that a lot of cases?
Of course, you find it in most cases.
Yeah.
There's always that add on top of your day job that companies think they can do, and integration is a full-time job, particularly when you look at the functional areas of the business. You've got to have dedicated 1, 2, or 3 resources to get through the integration. In many cases, it depends on, what you're buying and the complexity of the deal that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, the resources, the experience of the resources.
Yes.
They may have expertise in their functional area, et cetera, but maybe no expertise at all in terms of the cross-functional activities that are going to take place.
Right.
So, and the other thing that's humorous, but it's not, and that is that oftentimes in selecting the resource, companies tend to look for the most available person. and what we say, availability is not a qualification here.
That is so true.
So my belief is you look for the person who is unavailable, who is so tied up, so valuable in the organization that you wouldn't be able to pull he or she out of that role. That's probably the person we need.
Yeah. So let me ask you,
Sure.
Let's address the folks out there in our community who haven't done this before, or they haven't done much of it, or they haven't done it well. Where should they start when they think about integration? Should they be obviously signing up for one of your classes, right? Without
oh yeah,
right? But
sure.
What should they do? Should they look to an outside firm? Where should they start on this path so they know whether or not they can use their internal resources? They have to hire an outside firm so they can make some of those decisions early on.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that there's a backstop. There is a level of expertise that is supporting the entire exercise. And if that's not resident in the business, you have to go outside. You absolutely do. And you need to get your hands on some trained consultants or, advisors. I can talk a long time about consultants versus advisors and experienced versus inexperienced, those kinds of things, but you're going to have that. It depends on how close you are to actually doing a transaction. If you're just emerging out of, targeting and that kind of thing, I mean, you have to get training. You got to get the foundation built. And I think all of our people, or virtually all of the people who would go to the M&A Leadership Council, would say, this foundation is something that we need, and we should have done it a long time ago, or whatever. So that's the purpose. The M&A Leadership Council was designed as a give back to the M&A community. It operates basically as a nonprofit, a break-even organization, and that was a gift that Jack Prouty and I decided to do, since we were both virtually retired at the time anyway. So we designed it that way. So it's a very unique organization, as most people out there know that have gone to it. So 2 things. I mean, you've got to have training for the resources if they're not highly experienced and don't bring the tools of the trade and the capabilities. You have to have the training, obviously. And then I think that the next thing is you have to have this backstop. You got to have a support system that knows what they're doing. And there's an art to selecting that as well.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, you got a big name organization out there and the people they're going to send are going to be as fluent in M&A as the person who came to visit us last week. So there's a lot to that. I don't know if that's answering your question precisely, but I think it's very important.
Yeah, no. I think it did. Let me ask you, when it comes to integration, are there 3 areas of integration, or 2 or 5, that I know they're all important, obviously, but are there a couple that rise to a level at which, like, if you miss these areas of integration, you have no shot at achieving value?
Sure. There's the overarching umbrella that sometimes we give too much importance to, and that's culture. Everybody wants to talk about culture, and culture is very, very important. Culture is very difficult to get your hands on prior to close, to discover things that you need to discover prior to that. So you're going to be dealing in a reactionary environment around culture. Now, there's a challenge out there, and that is that how do you differentiate culture from business model? And I think a lot of companies will confuse that issue. They have a business model out there, and the models of the 2 companies being united don't mix well, or they don't go to market the same way, those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, the CEO is announcing, well, our cultures didn't fit, that kind of thing. So I think culture is critical. I think decision making is really, really important. And I think I stated that earlier, that in some of our prior practices, when I was doing M&A integration as a consultant, we even had a decision-making agreement that we had with the CEO, that this is how we're going to operate, and this is what you're going to do. And we did that in $1 billion plus transaction with over $75 million in synergies to capture. But we knew to be successful, we needed that CEO to behave properly. And it was called the behavior agreement. And you can just imagine going in and saying, we want you to sign a behavior agreement. But I think it stressed clearly, and maybe a little bit cleverly, that you're important to this whole thing, and we need decisions made quickly. So we're going to put together the integration teams, and we're going to be able to bubble up everything that needs to be decided on. And then we're going to coagulate those bubbles. We're going to pull them together, and we're going to look at them. We're going to have a lower level to make some of the key decisions down here. You're going to authorize those. And then every week, the 2, 3, or 4 things that could be deal destructors, you're going to get the information, and we want you to make a decision. And if you can't make the decision, we're going to give you 12 days and bring it back to you again, and you got to make a decision one way or the other. Wow. So, I mean, that's how disciplined I think decision-making needs to be. And that ought to scare the pants off of about any CEO, but it's important, Dominic. It really is. Yeah. So, so those are things that are really key.
Got it. Jim, I'm sure you've been called in to these situations. There's, the deal's been done. They're in the middle, or maybe at the beginning stages of integration, and it's not going well. It's obvious that they're botching it. Mm-hmm. What should a CEO do when he's faced with that situation? He realizes that this deal, all the promises are slipping away day by day. How do they get their arms around that and right the ship, and probably have to win back, the hearts and minds of the people that they sold this to initially? Mm-hmm.
It happens sometimes. I don't know that there are many that admit to it, but I think they probably take that issue and they struggle with it way too long before it becomes a required divestment or whatever. But there are companies like M&A Partners, which is part of the M&A Leadership Council, who focus greatly on integration and have a practice around reintegration or fixing the problems. But I don't think it's smart to put it back in the hands of the people who didn't do it right the first time. I think you have to get a new set of eyes and a new vision on the business And you have to do it with people that are so highly experienced that they can walk in and they can see the problems.
Yeah.
You don't need to consult it to death. You don't need to have a lot of meetings. If you don't have quality resources coming in from the outside that really know what they're doing, you're probably just going to continue in turmoil. So, but it can be a very big business, and it should be one that CEOs and the management team are willing to throw up their hands and say, let's do this.
Yeah.
The longer you're in turmoil and the longer your things are not working out well, you know, the worse things get.
Yeah, it certainly holds true with, you know, every aspect of an M&A deal, right? We talk often about you need an M&A experienced attorney. The accountants on the deal should have a lot of M&A experience. Why wouldn't you pull in people who have this integration experience, right?
Exactly.
That's what really solidifies the value that, you know, you were hoping to get out of the deal.
No, absolutely. And I think the return on investment metric you mentioned earlier is geometric. I mean, you can, when you're bleeding that bad, you need to have somebody that knows how to put on the tourniquet and triage the situation. I think that's a great word for what we're trying to do. Is exactly we're triaging a situation, and you can't go in and study stuff, if you will. Yeah.
You know, so integration to me, sort of, I've been fighting this battle for so many years, and it seems like it's an uphill battle to convince owners of businesses to plan for these events well in advance, whether it's an exit, an acquisition, whatever it is. Don't wake up one day and decide we're going to do this and expect that your house is in order and you're ready, right? Time and time again, I think the statistic is that over 70% of owners don't prepare for their exit, properly plan for their exit. That statistic just blows my mind. And as much as we talk to owners about it, it's hard to move the needle. Is integration sort of the same thing? Do people just, it's just such an afterthought that they just can't get their arms wrapped around it? Is it the same battle that we fight on preparing for an exit?
I think so. You know, integration is very, very difficult. It's one of the most, difficult business processes, as it were, of anything else you might do in your career. That's why the M&A Leadership Council created our CMAS program for certification. And we focus primarily on integration, but now we do it across the M&A life cycle. But it's to make sure that people focus on their careers, their capabilities, and the best practices. So certification, I don't know if I'm going in the right direction, but certification is very, very important to the people who do this very difficult task. That's why we created it. So becoming an M&A certified specialist with the M&A Leadership Council provides people with a credential that says, hey, I've done this. Now, our credentialing and our certification program is not about just taking a training course, coming out and taking a test and becoming certified. You have to prove that you have developed the expertise. Yeah. It's very, very unusual. It's very difficult to do that. And so preparation for a good exit or for the completion of the deal, the integration, you know, you can get certified, you get certified people to lead these kinds of things. And I hope, Dominic, over the course of time, that more and more people will become certified M&A specialists, that as they move through their career, changing companies or not, they'll be planted in roles that are going to be more impactful, more successful. They'll have a larger say-so via their experience when they're doing these things.
Yeah, I think it's so important that people educate themselves before you go into what are significant investments, and you could be impacting the lives of lots of people if it doesn't work out.
Absolutely.
Your clients, your employees, your vendors. I mean, the trickle down effect of a deal not working could be devastating to a lot of people.
Exactly. Yes, we're impacting lives, and it's not just the business thing. There's a lot of lives impacted by M&A, and a lot of people think, well, you're in M&A. That's a very sexy kind of thing to be involved in. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's hard work, and the more you can internalize the effort, the resources required, the outcomes that need to be generated, and the value coming out the back end. And when you can get everybody focused on that, you can become very serious and very successful at growing your business.
Well, I got to tell you, I am so happy that there are people like you around who start.
I'm not around anymore.
Well, you were.
I retired in September, so go to the Leadership Council and call Mark Herndon up to be on your program sometime. He's really good, and he runs the Leadership Council now.
I will certainly do that. But my point was that, you started something like this to educate people, and doing it in a nonprofit way is just outstanding because that education is so needed. Deals are tough to begin with. And if you don't have the right people in place, and you don't have the right knowledge and education and your team in place, you're never going to get the outcomes that you would hope for.
That's right.
Jim, in closing up this conversation, what parting thoughts would you have for our community around integration or anything else M&A that you think would be helpful? And I'll throw in, and it doesn't have to be, but I'll throw in, especially in this COVID environment that we're dealing with, right?
Right. I thought you might bring that up. I mean, we have to right now. We are in a very, very challenging period, and it has caused a lot of people to make dramatic changes. Obviously, in the M&A Leadership Council, we are not having, very nice site-oriented on-site training in San Diego or Scottsdale, Arizona, or wherever we had these things in the past. Herndon and the rest of the team have had to pivot and go completely online. Now, I got to say they've been very successful at doing that. There is still maybe even a larger demand for getting this training, but it's not the same. I mean, we're all really struggling. How do you do a diligence, a discovery? All the other, you can do some research, obviously, but you're not going to get behind the walls of an organization in this environment. So, Dominic, it's going to be very difficult, and I don't know when we're going to pull out of this. Some days I feel positive, other days I feel it's really going to be around, or it might become really, the absence of travel might become a real hindrance to getting on-site training. And our people that have been through the training will say it makes a huge difference to be on-site and be with 30, 40 of your peers from different companies and be able to talk and interact around best practices and what they do about this and that. And that's one of the things certainly that made that very unique. So I just think we have to go on. I think that the good news is the training that the council does today is online. It's interactive, which is unique. And the tools are still, available, those kinds of things. So you can get a lot for, I have to say, a lot less money because, they're not paying for airplane rides and all the other stuff.
Sure.
So, but it's working as well as can be expected.
Yeah. And, as far as principles in a deal, I mean, the point is so well taken that it's going to be so difficult to do diligence and integration. We had a tour of a company, a factory, a couple of weeks ago that was done 100% via Zoom, with the owner walking around with their cell phone, the entire and it was a massive factory, walking around the entire factory, stopping and providing some commentary. But I mean, it was great. And they got to really see behind the walls, but only to a certain extent, right? I mean, it was all via Zoom. It's not like touching and feeling it and
No.
seeing how it all operates and comes together. And the buyers are not ready to do that. The seller's not ready to do that.
Right.
And, they're probably going to have to and figure that out in order for the deal to get consummated. But it's a brave new world.
Yeah, that's a scary scenario there. I'm sure if I were the CEO, I'd only want to show you the things that I want you to see. And so, you're caught in that environment. That's difficult.
Yeah.
So, here we are. New technologies are coming out. Zoom's coming out with a whole new physical instrument that has multiple mics and all that stuff. And I think everybody's getting ready for the long pull, which we may have here. Pray every day that we're going to have a new vaccine or a new, way to kill this thing off. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll do the best we can. The M&A community, Dominic, always reacts, and we'll figure it out.
Creativity is if you're in this world, creativity is in your blood. And if it's not, you don't last in this business for very long.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Well, such a pleasure to have you on. Could you just leave? I know you're retired. You probably don't want to take the calls directly, but if folks listening wanted to get in touch with the M&A Council, how could they reach the proper person there?
Well, you can go to the website, and I think there's contact information on the website, 𝐬𝐻.org. And if not, somebody's going to lead you to Mark Herndon or one of the other executives that are there. Mark is the new chairman of the council, doing a great job. There's other resources and other companies, but let me say this. I retired, but I'm still busy, and there's still an opportunity for me to give back. And I will take a phone call, or I will take an email. We probably should start with that. And so Jim Jeffries, JEFFRIES at 𝐬𝐻.org. And send me a message and let me know what you're struggling with. And then we'll tee up a Zoom, we'll tee up a phone call, we can do whatever, but maybe I can add some value. You never know.
Awesome. Jim, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. God bless you. Thanks, Dominic.
Same to you.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you enjoy our content, please remember to subscribe and review our show. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.